So what if everything, and I mean literally everything you were taught in school about money, is exactly what's keeping you from ever being wealthy?
Yeah, it is a truly terrifying proposition when you really stop and think about it.
Right.
I mean, honestly, we spend, what, a minimum of 12 to 16 years in this educational system, and we just completely trust that it's preparing us for the real world.
Exactly. You just assume that's how it works.
Right, and to suddenly confront the idea that the curriculum itself, like the very things we are told to do, might actually be the trap, that is a really heavy paradigm shift to ask someone to make.
Oh, totally. But that is exactly the shift we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into this fascinating stack of excerpts and source materials from Robert Kiyosaki's financial classic, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It's such a foundational text.
It really is. And we're going to bypass all the introductory fluff today. We're getting straight into the friction because, well, the entire foundation of this material rests on this deeply personal comparative case study.
Yeah.
It's about a young boy growing up with two father figures, and they represent completely diametrically opposed views on how the world actually works.
The contrast there is exactly what makes the analysis so robust. So let's look at the biological father, right? The man the text refers to as poor dad.
Right.
Now, it is incredibly crucial to understand that this moniker, poor dad, it has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of intelligence or, a lack of societal prestige.
Not at all.
No, this man is a highly educated intellectual. He holds a PhD. He actually completed his undergraduate work in less than 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking about someone who attended Stanford, the University of Chicago, Northwestern University.
Yeah.
And all of it was financed by full academic scholarships.
Right. I mean, he is basically the absolute gold standard of the 20th century American educational ideal. He played by all the rules.
Exactly, every single one.
He worked incredibly hard. He achieved a prominent position in education, and he earned a very substantial income. By all our traditional metrics, he won the game.
He did.
Yet, when you look at the material, it reveals this chronic, lifelong struggle with bills, which culminates in this really tragic end where he passes away, leaving behind unresolved debt.
Yeah, it's sobering. And then right next to that, you have the counterweight, which is rich dad.
The friend's dad.
Right, this is his best friend's father. And this man represents an entirely different archetype. I mean, he didn't just fail to get a PhD, he never even finished the 8th grade.
He's literally an academic dropout.
Yet, through this completely different application of intelligence, he goes on to become one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. He eventually leaves behind this massive empire worth tens of millions of dollars, establishing charities and, funding his community.
What I find so compelling here, just from a psychological standpoint, is the environment this creates for a young mind.
Oh, for sure.
Because if you only have one dominant authority figure in your life, you tend to just absorb their worldview by osmosis, right?
You don't even question it.
Exactly. It's just your unquestioned reality. But when you have two charismatic, influential, hardworking men giving you completely opposite advice on how to survive and thrive, you are forced out of passivity.
You have to make a choice.
Right. You have to compare the data, you have to weigh the evidence, and actively choose your reality.
And see, that is the exact position the text places you, the listener, in today. You are making that exact same choice.
Every day.
Yes. The premise here is that wealth isn't just about, the mechanics of banking or whatever. It is an ideological election you make every single day with every single dollar that passes through your hands.
I love that. So let's look at the evidence. Let's put these two philosophies side by side because, man, they are wildly incompatible.
You really are.
It starts with their fundamental definition of money. So the academic father, the poor dad, he operated on that classic belief that the love of money is the root of all evil.
Right. It's a perspective that views the pursuit of capital as inherently corrupting. Like, it frames ambition itself as a moral failing.
Yeah.
But the rich dad, he flipped that script entirely. His philosophy was the lack of money is the root of all evil.
Which is such a stark contrast.
It is. He viewed poverty, scarcity, and that constant financial desperation as the true drivers of societal decay and personal suffering.
And that reframing changes your entire posture toward work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you think money is evil, you subconsciously avoid accumulating it. You sabotage yourself.
You totally do.
And if we look at their views on taxes, we see the exact same divergence. The academic dad believed in the traditional model of social equity, that taxes should punish the producers to subsidize those with less.
which perfectly aligns with the system-reliant mindset.
Right.
The rich dad, however, he viewed taxes purely through the lens of incentive structures. He argued that the tax code is literally designed to punish those who produce and reward those who don't.
He didn't look at taxes morally at all.
Not even a little bit. He looked at them mechanically.
And this mechanical versus moral view, it bleeds directly into their career advice. And this is where it gets incredibly relatable, because almost everyone listening right now has been given the academic dad's advice.
Oh, absolutely.
Study hard so you can find a good company to work for.
The pursuit of the safe harbor, right? The illusion of corporate paternalism.
Exactly. Just get a good job and you'll be taken care of. But the rich dad's advice was study hard so you can find a good company to buy.
Notice the difference in agency there.
Yeah, it's huge.
One mindset seeks permission to enter a system. The other mindset seeks to own the system outright. And this naturally extends to how they process risk, too. The academic dad advises, when it comes to money, play it safe. Don't take risks.
Which, ironically, is probably the riskiest thing you can do in a dynamic economy.
Exactly. The rich dad counters that with, learn to manage risk.
Manage it.
Right. He doesn't say ignore risk or, go be reckless. He says risk is a variable you must learn to calculate and control.
And these aren't just philosophical musings, right? These beliefs dictate real-world action. And honestly, nowhere is that more evident than in their view of the family home.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, the academic dad echoes the modern consensus, which is our home is our largest investment and our greatest asset.
While the rich dad just bluntly states, my house is a liability, and if your house is your largest investment, you're in trouble.
And we are definitely going to tear into the mathematics of that specific controversy later on.
We have to.
Because that is a sacred cow that absolutely needs to be examined.
We will. But before we get to the balance sheets and the cash flow diagrams, we really have to look at the operating system that runs those balance sheets.
The psychology.
Yes, the psychology. Because the text emphasizes that these contrasting philosophies, they manifested most powerfully in their everyday language.
Okay, let's dissect this, because this concept of language shaping reality is profound. It's about the specific words you use when confronting a financial hurdle. When faced with something expensive, the academic dad defaulted to a very, very common phrase.
I can't afford it.
It's a phrase most of us use without even a second thought.
All the time.
But the rich dad actually forbade those words from being uttered in his house.
Yeah.
Like he viewed it as linguistic poison.
Wow.
He insisted that the phrasing must be altered to a question. How can I afford it?
So why does that syntactic shift matter so much? I mean, what is the actual cognitive difference between a statement and a question in this context?
Well, the analysis in the text points to the literal neurological response, I can't afford it, is a declarative statement. It is final.
Right.
When you say it, the brain immediately ceases to evaluate the problem. It just lets you off the hook. There is no more cognitive load.
You're just done.
You're done. And furthermore, it generates this subtle feeling of helplessness, a sort of, low-grade despondency. You are acknowledging a limitation imposed upon you by external forces. It's a mental dead end.
You are surrendering to the barrier. Exactly. But how can I afford it is an interrogative. A question creates an open loop in the mind.
Oh, I see.
It forces the brain, which, by the way, the rich dad considered the most powerful computer on earth, to boot up and start running algorithms. It demands a solution.
It makes you work.
It does. It forces you to look at your resources, your skills, your network, and figure out a bridge over that barrier.
So it shifts you from a victim of circumstance to an active problem solver.
And the rich dad was fanatical about this. He believed that the brain is a muscle. The stronger his brain got through problem solving, the more wealth he could generate.
That makes total sense.
He viewed the automatic reflex of saying, I can't afford it, not as a statement of fact, but as a symptom of pure mental laziness.
Okay, I understand the mechanism, but I think we need to look at the practical application of this because, frankly, there's a danger here.
What do you mean?
Well, if I walk past a dealership and I see a $250,000 luxury sports car and I refuse to say I can't afford it, and instead I say, how can I afford it? Aren't I just giving myself psychological cover to make a terrible financial decision? Like, isn't that just a gateway to hyper-consumerism and massive debt?
That is such a critical distinction, and honestly, it's a trap many people fall into when they misinterpret this principle.
Right, because it sounds like permission to buy stuff.
It does, but the text is very clear that this is not an endorsement of buying every luxury you covet.
Oh.
It is not about financing a lifestyle you haven't earned. It is about the mental workout.
So the process is the point, not the purchase.
Precisely. Think of it in terms of physical fitness. You don't go to the gym and do heavy deadlifts because you plan on carrying a refrigerator on your back through the grocery store.
Right.
You don't need that specific strength for that specific task. You lift the weights so that your overall musculoskeletal system is strong, resilient, and capable when unexpected demands arise.
Oh, that's a great analogy. So the rich dad isn't saying, figure out how to buy the car and then go into debt to get it.
No.
He's saying, run the mental marathon required to figure out how one could generate the capital to buy the car.
Yes. You might run the numbers, build a theoretical business model to generate the $250,000, and then ultimately decide, you know what, I have the capacity to buy this, but allocating capital to a depreciating asset is foolish, so I'm going to pass.
The victory is the enhanced financial intelligence, not the car itself.
Exactly. The poor dad's mindset shuts down the brain to seek the comfort of safety. And the text makes a very compelling argument that this exact desire for safety is what leads people directly into the most pervasive economic trap of the modern era.
Which is the core thesis of the author's financial education.
It is.
So let's look at how the rich dad began teaching this to the author when he was just 9 years old. It starts with the first major paradigm shift, which is the trap of working for money.
The narrative here is just a brilliant illustration of experiential learning.
It really is.
The author, as a 9-year-old, goes to his friend's wealthy father and explicitly asks to be taught how to get rich.
And the rich dad doesn't sit him down with a chalkboard and explain compound interest.
No, he doesn't.
He puts him to work. He assigns him a job, dusting cans in a hot, poorly ventilated convenience store for 3 hours every weekend. And the wage, 10 cents an hour.
Which was an intentionally insulting wage, even for the time period.
It was completely designed to provoke him.
Oh, absolutely.
And it works. The kid does this mind-numbing labor for a few weeks. He's missing out on his weekend baseball games. He feels deeply exploited.
As any kid would.
Right. The frustration builds until he finally marches into the rich dad's office, furious, ready to quit, and demands a raise. He essentially accuses the rich dad of being a greedy capitalist who exploits child labor.
And this is the inflection point. The rich dad doesn't apologize. He doesn't offer the raise.
No.
Instead, he flips the script entirely. He tells the boy, now you are starting to sound exactly like most of my employees.
Oof. It's a brutal reality check.
It really is. He uses the boy's anger to highlight a systemic behavioral pattern.
How so?
He points out that when most adults feel they aren't making enough money to cover their lifestyle, they react exactly like the 9-year-old. They get angry at their boss. They quit.
Yeah.
They go look for another job with a slightly higher hourly rate, genuinely believing that a few more dollars a week will somehow solve their underlying financial anxiety.
Or they take a second job, trading even more of their finite time for linear income.
Exactly. They never question the paradigm itself. They just try to negotiate better terms within a fundamentally flawed system. They accept the premise that their labor is the only thing they have to trade for capital.
What I love about this scene is the rich dad's reaction to the boy's anger.
Oh, so unexpected.
He tells him he is thrilled that he's angry.
Yeah.
I mean, we are usually taught to suppress anger, especially in professional environments. But the rich dad frames anger as a vital component of adult learning.
He does.
He says that true learning requires massive energy, passion, and a burning desire. And that anger, combined with love, is the formula for passion.
It's a very visceral approach to psychology. The rich dad explains that when it comes to the subject of money, the vast majority of people operate completely devoid of passion. Their primary operating system is fear.
Let's drill down into that, because the text identifies fear and its counterpart greed or desire as the two twin engines of what is famously called the rat race.
Right.
How do these two emotions systematically dismantle a person's ability to build wealth?
Well, it is a devastatingly effective self-perpetuating cycle, and it always begins with fear.
Yeah.
The primal fear of not having enough. The fear of missing the rent payment, the fear of defaulting on a car loan, the fear of the social stigma of poverty.
It's that constant low-level dread.
Exactly. That fear is the alarm clock. It gets people out of bed, it puts them in traffic, and it forces them to go to a job they likely tolerate at best.
They are essentially working to medicate the fear.
Yes, they believe the paycheck is the cure. But the relief is entirely temporary. Because the moment that paycheck clears the bank account, the second emotion hijacks their nervous system.
Greed.
Greed, or more accurately, unchecked desire.
The culture of consumption takes over?
Precisely. They suddenly have liquidity. The fear recedes for a moment, and their brain starts generating desires. A newer car, a larger television, a vacation to post on social media, a nicer apartment.
Whatever the shiny new thing is.
Right, so they spend the capital to satisfy the desire.
And the moment the capital is deployed, the liquidity is gone, and the fear immediately returns.
And the cycle locks in. Work, earn, spend, panic, repeat.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. Even when they experience a surge of success, like a promotion or a significant raise, the cycle doesn't break.
It just gets bigger.
It just scales up.
Yeah.
They use the extra income to take on more expensive liabilities, a bigger mortgage, a higher car payment. Their expenses rise in perfect lockstep with their income. That is the literal definition of the rat race.
The text utilizes a classic analogy here, but applies it brilliantly to macroeconomics. It's the image of a donkey dragging a heavy cart down a dirt road.
Oh, I love this one.
The owner of the cart is sitting up top, dangling a carrot on a stick just inches in front of the donkey's nose.
It perfectly encapsulates the illusion.
Doesn't it? The donkey is exerting all the physical effort. The donkey believes that if it just walks a little faster, works a little harder, it will catch the carrot.
But it never does.
Right, because the geometry of the stick ensures the carrot is always out of reach. The owner of the cart is going exactly where he wants to go using the donkey's labor.
And in this framework, money is the carrot.
It is.
It is an illusion utilized to direct human labor. People use the illusion of a future windfall, the next raise, the next bonus, to soothe the deep-seated, unspoken fear of financial ruin.
But because they lack financial literacy, they just wake up with that exact same fear the next morning.
The emotions are running their intellect rather than their intellect managing their emotions.
You know, this is where we need to challenge the listener. If you are listening to this on your commute or while you're working, you have to do a ruthless self-audit.
Absolutely.
When you feel the anxiety of inflation or the fear of an unexpected medical bill, what is your default cognitive reflex?
That's the question.
Do you immediately think, I need to put in more overtime, or I need to polish my resume and find a higher paying job? If so, you are operating as the donkey.
You really are.
You're relying on the very mechanism that keeps you trapped.
And the rich dad's methodology to break this conditioning was, frankly, radical. After the boy complains about the 10-cent wage, the rich dad doesn't raise it.
He eliminates it.
He eliminates it completely. He tells the 9-year-old he will continue to work, but for absolutely zero pay.
Which sounds like madness to a traditional employee.
It does. But the psychological intent was to force the boy's brain to stop expecting a paycheck.
Because the paycheck was the blinder?
Yes. As long as his brain was fixated on the Friday envelope, his vision was narrowed. By removing the safety net of the wage, he forced the boy to broaden his peripheral vision and start looking for opportunities to create value, rather than just trading time for a fixed sum.
And this is a creative breakthrough.
It sure does.
The kids notice that the convenience store is throwing away expired comic books. They negotiate to take the discarded comics, and they open a library in a friend's basement, charging neighborhood kids admission to read unlimited comics for a few hours.
They even hired a librarian.
They did. They scaled it. They were making more in a week from the library than they would have made in months of dusting cans. They built an asset.
And more importantly, the asset generated income, whether they were physically present in the basement or not.
They detached their time from their income.
Yes. But to achieve that detachment, to escape the fear-driven rat race, you cannot rely on ambition alone. You must build a specific type of cognitive infrastructure.
Okay, so this transitions us from the psychology of wealth to the actual structural engineering of it. The text makes a powerful point about foundations. If your goal is to build a modest single-family home in the suburbs, you can pour a 6-inch concrete slab. It will hold.
Sure.
But if your goal is to build the Empire State Building, you cannot use that same slab. You have to excavate down into the bedrock, pour massive pylons, and build a deep structural foundation.
And the tragedy of the modern middle class is that they are attempting to build an Empire State Building of wealth, retirement, college funds, generational security on a 6-inch slab of financial literacy.
And when economic storms hit a recession, a market crash, rampant inflation, the slab cracks.
And the entire structure collapses.
So what is the bedrock? How do we build that deep foundation? The text strips away all the opaque jargon used by Wall Street. It ignores the complex derivatives and the mathematical models and relies on a brutally simple heuristic.
The KISS principle.
Keep it super simple.
Exactly. The foundation relies on understanding one single rule and aggressively applying it for the rest of your life.
And here is the rule. You must know the absolute difference between an asset and a liability, and you must spend your life buying assets. The text states unequivocally, the rich acquire assets, the poor and the middle class acquire liabilities that they falsely believe are assets.
Now, to someone with a background in traditional accounting, the way the text defines these terms can be, well, infuriating.
Oh, accountants hate this part.
They do, because if you look at a traditional corporate balance sheet, the definitions are murky. Things that depreciate, things that cost money to maintain, are often listed as assets.
But the text argues that this traditional accounting complexity is exactly what confuses the middle class. If you want to build personal wealth, you have to define an asset and a liability strictly by one metric:
Cash flow.
cash flow.
It is elegant in its simplicity. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, whether you work or not. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket, period.
If a piece of real estate costs you money every month, it is a liability. If it generates surplus cash every month, it is an asset.
Exactly. If you want to be wealthy, you spend your life accumulating things that deposit money into your account. If you want to struggle, you spend your life accumulating things that withdraw money from your account.
Okay, we cannot gloss over this without addressing the massive, towering sacred cow of the American economy,
The family home.
the family home. From the time we are children, we are indoctrinated with the belief that buying a house is the ultimate financial milestone.
It's the American dream.
Right? Bankers tell you it's an asset. Real estate agents tell you it's an investment. Financial planners tell you it's the bedrock of your net worth.
And the text directly attacks this consensus, labeling the primary residence as a liability.
I want to really dig into this because the immediate defensive reaction from listeners is, well, of course a house has maintenance costs. I have to fix the roof. I know that. But it appreciates over time.
Right, that's what everyone says.
But the argument in the text is far deeper than just roofs are expensive. Let's break down the macro cash flow of the middle-class homeownership cycle.
Okay, let's run a highly realistic scenario. Let's take a young, educated professional couple.
Okay.
They are currently renting an apartment. Their living expenses are relatively contained. They are both advancing in their careers, and their dual income increases.
So they feel flush with cash. The fear recedes, the desire kicks in.
Exactly. They decide they have outgrown the apartment. They want to participate in the American dream, so they purchase a home. What happens mechanically to their financial structure the moment they sign those closing documents?
Their cash flow immediately reverses direction.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
They take on a 30-year mortgage.
Wow.
And if you actually look at the amortization schedule of a standard 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, the math is staggering. For the first decade, they are paying almost entirely interest to the bank.
They are not building significant equity. They are just renting money at a premium.
And the mortgage is just the baseline. They acquire a new permanent property tax burden that typically increases over time.
Right. Taxes rarely go down.
Never. They are mandated to carry comprehensive homeowners insurance. They take on the utility load of a larger footprint.
And we have to factor in the psychological cascade effect of the purchase, too.
Oh, the cascade effect is huge.
Right. A new house in a nicer neighborhood almost universally prompts a lifestyle upgrade. The old furniture from the apartment doesn't fit the aesthetic of the new house, so they finance new furniture.
Right.
The old car looks out of place in the new driveway, so they take on an auto loan.
The house acts as a massive financial vacuum. It is a catalyst for acquiring multiple peripheral liabilities. So by the strict definition of cash flow taking money out of your pocket every single month, the primary residence is a liability.
But the text argues that the monthly cash drain isn't even the most damaging part.
No, it's not.
The true devastation of treating a primary residence as your primary investment comes from 3 hidden opportunity costs.
And this is where we elevate beyond basic budgeting. Let's talk about the first massive unseen loss.
A loss of time.
Yes. When you tie up hundreds of thousands of dollars in a down payment and decades of monthly payments into a single, highly illiquid physical structure, you have paralyzed your capital. That is capital that is sitting inert.
You've killed the velocity of your money.
Exactly. While your money is trapped in the drywall of your house, hoping for market appreciation, that same capital could have been deployed into high-yield, income-producing assets.
Like businesses, Dividend-yielding equities, commercial real estate.
Right, you lose decades of compounding growth.
Wow. Okay, and the second loss is the loss of additional capital. Every dollar spent on repairing a foundational crack, replacing an HVAC system, or upgrading a kitchen to maintain market value is a dollar that was permanently diverted away from acquiring true assets.
And the third loss is perhaps the most insidious because it creates a permanent ceiling on your financial intelligence.
The loss of education.
Right, because all of their liquidity is absorbed by the house and its associated lifestyle costs, the couple never has surplus discretionary capital.
They're tapped out.
And without surplus capital, you cannot participate in sophisticated investments. You never learn how to analyze a private equity deal. You never learn how to structure a real estate syndication. You never learn the mechanics of options trading.
Because you never have the extra cash to try.
Exactly. You are entirely boxed out of the arena where true wealth is generated.
You never gain the reps. You remain a financial novice, relying on mutual funds and just hoping the housing market doesn't crash.
And this structural trap is exacerbated by a brutal tax mechanism known as bracket creep.
Bracket creep, right.
As this middle-class couple continues to work hard and earn raises to pay for all these liabilities, their gross income goes up. But the tax code is progressive. Their higher salary pushes them into higher marginal tax brackets.
So the government takes a larger percentage of their new money before they ever even see it.
Exactly. They might get a $10,000 raise. But after higher federal taxes, state taxes, and payroll taxes, the net increase in their paycheck is just a fraction of that.
Yet, they adjust their spending based on the gross $10,000.
It creates a structural deficit. The middle class is essentially running on a treadmill that is slowly tilting upward.
Ugh, that's a bleak image.
It is. They are working harder, earning more on paper, but bleeding cash through progressive taxation, mortgage interest, and consumer debt.
This is the illusion of wealth built on debt. So if we accept this premise, if we realize that the house won't save us and that we must aggressively acquire true cash-flowing assets, how do we actually do that while surviving in the real world?
Right. How do we operationalize it?
Yeah, how do we build the armor to protect those assets?
This requires a shift from defensive survival to offensive wealth creation. And the text outlines the mechanics of this transition through 3 interconnected lessons.
Okay.
Mind your own business, the power of corporations, and the invention of money.
Let's tackle them sequentially. Mind your own business. This sounds like, generic life advice, but in this context, it is a very precise financial directive about the difference between your profession and your business.
The confusion between those two terms is exactly where the middle class gets lost. If you ask most people, what is your business? They will answer with their profession.
Right.
They will say, I am a banker, or I am a software engineer.
But the text argues that if you are a W-2 employee, banking is not your business. Software is not your business. That is simply your income column.
Your business, in the context of wealth creation, is your asset column.
That distinction is huge.
It's everything. The trap of the rat race is that you spend your entire life exhausting your physical and mental energy minding everybody else's business and completely neglecting your own.
Let's trace the trajectory of an employee's labor. When you clock in at 9 a.m., who are you actually working for?
Well, first and foremost, you're working for the owners of the company or the shareholders. Your surplus labor is what generates their profit. You are actively building their asset column.
Then, before you even receive your compensation, you are working for the government. The state extracts its share via payroll and income taxes directly from your check.
And finally, when the remnant of your earnings hits your bank account, you are working for the bank.
Right, the mortgage.
You immediately transfer a massive percentage of it to pay the mortgage, the auto loan, and the credit card interest. You have enriched the corporation, the government, and the financial institutions. Your own asset column, your actual business, remains completely empty.
So the operational shift here is to redefine your relationship with the money you do manage to save. And the text provides an incredible visual heuristic for this.
It really does.
Once a dollar successfully makes it through the gauntlet of taxes and expenses and lands in your asset column, you must undergo a psychological shift. That dollar ceases to be currency. It becomes your employee.
It is a phenomenal way to conceptualize capital.
I picture a tiny little dollar bill holding a briefcase.
Yes.
And the beauty of this employee is that it doesn't need sleep, it doesn't need health insurance, and it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your mandate is to never, ever let that employee out of the asset column.
You build an army of capital that works tirelessly to generate more capital. But, this raises a practical question and one the text addresses directly.
Which is?
Are you supposed to live like an ascetic monk? Is the goal to just hoard capital and never enjoy life?
Oh, right, because that sounds miserable. But the text isn't anti-luxury. It's about the sequence of acquiring
The
luxury.
sequence matters.
The rule is that luxury should only be purchased with the surplus cash flow generated by your assets, never with the sweat of your own labor, and never through consumer debt.
The author provides a perfect case study involving his wife. She wanted to purchase a new Mercedes. A typical middle-class response would be to look at their high combined salaries, realize they could easily afford the monthly payment, and go sign a financing agreement at the dealership.
Tying their future labor to a depreciating liability.
Exactly. But they applied the rich dad's principles. Instead of buying the car, she deployed her capital into acquiring an apartment building.
Which is a lot harder than going to a dealership.
It is. She waited 4 years. It required delayed gratification. But eventually, the net positive cash flow from those rental units grew large enough to entirely cover the cost of the Mercedes.
The asset bought the luxury. The core capital remained untouched, still working, still producing. The luxury was a reward for financial intelligence, not an impulse buy that created a multi-year financial burden.
Exactly. But if you are going to build this army of capital, you have to understand that there are forces constantly trying to erode it. Chief among them is taxation.
Right.
This brings us to the ultimate shield utilized by the wealthy, the legal structure of the corporation.
The text uses a historical anecdote here that absolutely blew my mind. It traces the origin of the modern corporate structure back to the era of sailing ships and the East India Company.
It's a crucial historical context.
Yeah.
Back then, incredibly wealthy individuals wanted to finance voyages to the New World or to Asia to trade for spices and treasure. The potential returns were astronomical, but the risk was equally catastrophic.
Ships sank, pirates attacked, crews mutinied.
Exactly. If a wealthy individual funded a ship out of their personal treasury and that ship sank, they weren't just out the cost of the ship. Under the laws of the time, they could be held personally liable for the loss of the crew, the debts incurred, everything.
One storm could wipe out a family's entire generational fortune. It was just too risky.
So to mitigate this existential risk, the legal concept of the corporation was engineered.
Wow.
The wealthy investors pooled their capital into a separate legal entity, the corporation. The corporation financed the voyage. If the ship went down, the investors only lost the specific capital they had injected into that specific corporation.
Their personal estates, their castles, their lands were completely shielded from liability.
The rules of the game were fundamentally altered. The rich created a barrier between their personal wealth and their operational risk. And the text points out that today, while we aren't financing wooden ships, the wealthy use the exact same legal vehicles, LLCs, C Corp, S Corp, to achieve two primary advantages.
Risk mitigation and, far more importantly, tax manipulation.
This is where we have to look at the stark mathematical difference in how money flows through the economy depending on your legal status. Let's look at the timeline of taxation for a W-2 employee.
Okay, the sequence is earn, tax, spend.
Right. If an employee earns $100,000, the government extracts its taxes right off the top. Let's say they take roughly 30%.
So 30 grand is just gone.
The employee never even sees that $30,000. They are left with $70,000, and from that diminished pool, they must try to pay their mortgage, buy their food, and survive.
Now, let's look at how capital flows through a corporation. The sequence is completely inverted.
A corporation operates on earn, spend, tax.
Earn, spend, tax.
If a corporation earns $100,000, it doesn't pay taxes immediately. It is legally allowed to pay its expenses first. It pays for its operations, its marketing, its equipment, its travel, its vehicles. It deducts all of these legitimate business expenses from the gross revenue.
So if that corporation spends $80,000 on legitimate business operations, it only pays taxes on the remaining $20,000 in profit.
Precisely. The employee pays taxes on the gross and lives on the net. The corporation lives on the gross and pays taxes on the net.
It's a completely different rule book.
It is a massive structural advantage that allows the wealthy to accelerate their capital accumulation exponentially. They are playing a different game with different rules.
And once you possess that corporate armor and you understand how to protect your capital, you graduate to the most advanced concept in the text. The idea that the rich invent money.
This is the transition from understanding the physics of money to understanding the alchemy of money.
I love that phrasing, alchemy.
Well, it is. The poor view money as a scarce, tangible resource that must be extracted through physical labor. The rich understand that fiat currency is essentially an illusion. It is an agreement, an idea, and therefore wealth can be manifested through applied intelligence.
The text provides a very specific technical example of this alchemy in action.
Yeah, the real estate example.
Right. The author is navigating a depressed real estate market. Everyone else is panicking, acting like the sky is falling. He uses his financial intelligence to spot an anomaly. He finds a house in foreclosure. The bank is desperate to get it off their books. He negotiates and buys the house for $20,000.
Which is a fraction of its actual intrinsic value.
Exactly. Shortly after, the market stabilizes slightly, and he finds a buyer willing to pay $60,000 for the house. Now, the conventional route here would be to sell the house, take the $40,000 profit in cash, and immediately get hammered by capital gains taxes.
Which diminishes the velocity of that new capital.
But he doesn't do that. He utilizes a mechanism called seller financing. He essentially tells the buyer, "You don't need to go to a bank to get a mortgage. I will be the bank."
Right.
The buyer gives him a small down payment, and the author creates a legally binding document, a promissory note, where the buyer agrees to pay him the remaining balance plus interest over a set number of years.
Let's break down what just happened mechanically.
Okay.
He didn't dig $40,000 out of the ground. He didn't work 40,000 hours in a cubicle. He took a piece of paper, wrote up an agreement, and instantly created a $40,000 performing asset in his column.
He literally invented money out of his own financial IQ.
And crucially, because he structured it as an installment sale, he defers the massive tax hit. He only pays taxes on the principal payments as they trickle in over the years, all while earning interest on the entire balance.
It is financial alchemy.
Now, I can anticipate the reaction of the listener here.
I know I have to play the skeptic because this is where people usually check out.
Go ahead.
A listener is hearing this and saying, okay, that's a neat trick, but I don't know how to draft a promissory note. I don't have $20,000 lying around to buy a foreclosure. Plus, the real estate market in my city in 2026 is nothing like that example. So this is useless to me.
And that reaction completely misses the forest for the trees. The text explicitly warns against getting bogged down in the specific tactics of past examples. The market will always change. Tax codes will update. The specific real estate play from a decade ago won't work today.
The tactic is obsolete, but the principle is eternal.
Exactly. The underlying principle is that your mind is your most powerful asset. The real world is not static. It is constantly generating new inefficiencies, new anomalies, and new opportunities to create value.
So it's not a lack of opportunity.
Not at all. The issue isn't a lack of opportunity. It's a lack of the cognitive framing required to recognize the opportunity.
We self-sabotage. We convince ourselves it's too complicated.
A lack of financial IQ keeps people paralyzed. They sit in the driveway, refusing to put the car in drive, waiting for every single traffic light in the city to turn green before they begin their journey.
Which is impossible.
They demand absolute certainty and zero risk before they allocate a single dollar.
And that demand for absolute certainty brings us to the massive psychological barrier that prevents 99% of people from ever utilizing these mechanics. It brings us to the psychology of risk and the fear of losing money.
This is the invisible force field. Because if the mechanics of wealth, creation, buying, cash-flowing assets, using corporate structures, exploiting market inefficiencies, are technically accessible to anyone who learns them, why doesn't everyone do it?
Right.
The answer is emotional.
It goes back to how we view our careers and our purpose. The academic dad valued job security above all else. He sought the tenure track, he wanted a guaranteed pension and ironclad benefits. He optimized his entire life for safety.
Because he viewed failure as fatal. But the rich dad operated on a completely different premise. His advice was, work to learn, don't work for money.
Which is so counterintuitive when you have bills to pay.
It is. But he advised seeking out jobs, even low-paying ones, based entirely on the skills you could extract from the experience.
Go work in sales to learn how to handle rejection. Go work in marketing to learn human psychology. The skills you acquire build your financial IQ, which is your true, unstealable wealth.
Exactly.
But here's the catch. To learn aggressively, you have to operate at the edge of your competence. And if you operate at the edge of your competence, you are going to fail. You are going to lose.
And this is where the rich dad introduces one of the most memorable metaphors in the text. He talks about the cultural mindset of the state of Texas.
The Texas mindset.
He says in Texas, everything is bigger. When Texans win, they win massively. But when they lose, it's spectacular.
They don't try to hide their failures, they build monuments to them. The text uses the Alamo as the ultimate example of this psychological framing.
Let's analyze the historical reality of the Alamo. It was a tactical disaster.
Complete disaster.
A group of men chose to barricade themselves in a structurally deficient mission, facing an overwhelmingly superior military force, knowing with near absolute certainty that they were going to be annihilated. It was a massive, devastating, total defeat.
By all traditional metrics, it was a failure that should have crushed the morale of the rebellion. But what did the culture do with that failure?
They didn't sweep it under the rug.
No, they weaponized it. They turned that devastating loss into a psychological rallying cry. Remember the Alamo. They used the energy of that defeat to fuel their ultimate victory in the war.
It is the ultimate reframe. The text argues that winning means being unafraid to lose. The poor dad's mindset is terrified of making a mistake. The host of internal doubts, the fear of looking foolish, the fear of losing capital, is actually what guarantees long-term financial failure.
The text points out a harsh empirical reality. Every single wealthy person has, at some point in their journey, lost money. They have made bad investments. They have had businesses fail.
It's inevitable.
But the vast majority of poor and middle-class people have never lost a dime in the market.
Because they refuse to enter the arena.
Right.
They preserve their small amount of capital by keeping it in a low-yield savings account, slowly being cannibalized by inflation, but they feel safe because the nominal number doesn't go down.
They avoid failure, but in doing so, they mathematically guarantee they will never achieve success.
And this fear isn't just internal. We are constantly bombarded by external noise. The text refers to it as the Chicken Little syndrome.
Yes, the cynics.
The cynics are everywhere, constantly shouting, the sky is falling, the market is overpriced, a recession is imminent. What if you lose it all?
Cynicism is easy because it sounds intelligent. It's always easy to poke holes in an idea.
To illustrate the devastating cost of this cynicism, the text cites the legendary mutual fund manager Peter Lynch. He provides a fascinating historical analysis of the 1950s.
This example is crazy.
This was the height of the Cold War. The geopolitical anxiety was suffocating. People were genuinely, reasonably terrified of a sudden nuclear annihilation.
The fear was palpable and pervasive.
So, driven by this overwhelming fear, what did thousands of Americans do? They took their hard-earned capital, their savings, and they buried it in the ground. Literally. They spent small fortunes excavating their backyards to build concrete fallout shelters, stocking them with canned goods and water purifiers.
They allocated their capital toward extreme risk mitigation based on a catastrophic projection.
Right. And Lynch points out the agonizing irony of this choice. If those exact same people had resisted the panic, if they had taken the thousands of dollars they spent on concrete and canned beans and invested it into the stock market of the 1950s, they would have participated in one of the greatest economic expansions in human history.
They would be completely financially independent today.
Their fear of a hypothetical catastrophe literally cost them their actual financial freedom.
The summary of this dynamic is perfect. Cynics criticize and winners analyze.
I love that.
Cynics allow their fear to blind them to the data. They see only the risk. Winners use analysis to open their eyes. They look at the exact same market conditions, strip away the emotional panic, and see the inefficiencies and opportunities that the cynics are too paralyzed to notice. All right, we have covered an immense amount of theoretical ground. We've deconstructed the divergent mindsets of the two fathers. We've mapped out the cash flow diagrams of assets versus liabilities.
We've exposed the illusion of the primary residence as an investment.
We've discussed the structural advantages of corporations and the necessity of conquering the fear of the Alamo.
The theory is established. The question now is execution.
Exactly. If a listener is sitting in their car right now or walking their dog and they are vibrating with this new perspective, how do they actually begin? We're going to extract the specific, actionable exercises laid out in the text to bridge the gap between reading about wealth and actually building it.
The first exercise is foundational. It precedes any financial tactic. You must define your emotional purpose. The text calls it finding your want and your don't want.
Why is this step one? I mean, why can't we just jump straight into analyzing real estate deals?
Because the friction of breaking out of the rat race is immense. You are swimming against the current of conventional societal wisdom. You will face setbacks.
It's going to get hard.
Exactly. And if your motivation is simply a vague desire to have more money, that motivation will evaporate the moment an investment goes south or a tenant refuses to pay rent.
You need an emotional anchor.
You need a deeply rooted, visceral reason. It's usually a combination of pain and desire. The don't want is the pain. I absolutely refuse to spend the next 40 years sitting in a cubicle taking orders from someone I don't respect. I refuse to let my children inherit my financial anxiety.
And the want is the pull. I want the absolute freedom to travel the world while I have my health. I want total control over my calendar.
Right. If that emotional core isn't burning hot, the mechanical process of wealth building will simply feel like too much work, and you will default back to the comfort of the rat race.
Exercise 2 is the daily practice of critical thinking. Let's call it the mirror test. This is about actively combating the herd mentality that dominates middle-class finance.
The herd mentality is powerful because it offers the illusion of safety in numbers. The text describes how people mindlessly repeat financial dogma as if it were laws of physics.
You need to diversify your portfolio.
Your home is your biggest investment.
Get a safe job with good benefits.
Right. The practice here is disruption. When you are faced with a significant financial decision, whether it's contributing to a 401k, buying a car, or taking out a loan, you literally look in the mirror and ask your inner genius, does this actually make sense for me?
You interrogate the premise. You ask, am I doing this because the math dictates it's a sound strategy for generating cash flow? Or am I doing this because my parents did it, my neighbors are doing it, and the bank is telling me to do it?
Stop conforming to the consensus and start auditing the advice.
Exercise 3 is perhaps the most counterintuitive, but arguably the most effective for rapid learning. Play games.
Yes.
The text heavily advocates for the use of board games, specifically games like Monopoly or the author's proprietary game Cash Flow.
It sounds juvenile to suggest playing board games is a serious wealth strategy, but the pedagogical value is massive. Games act as a behavioral mirror.
How so? Like, how does Monopoly translate to real life?
In the real world, the feedback loop on a financial decision can take years. If you buy a bad piece of real estate, it might take a decade of bleeding cash before you realize the magnitude of the error. The consequences are real and devastating.
You can't just restart the board.
Exactly. But in a game, the feedback loop is compressed into hours, and the environment is entirely risk-free.
So you can experiment.
Precisely. You can test strategies, you can act aggressively, and more importantly, you can observe your own psychological reactions.
That's interesting.
If you draw a bad card in the game and suddenly find yourself facing bankruptcy, how do you react? Do you freeze? Do you give up? Or do you start negotiating with the other players, analyzing the board, and creating a creative solution to generate liquidity?
It trains the neuroplasticity of your brain to see options where others see dead ends. It builds the mental muscle memory of wealth creation without risking actual capital.
Which prepares you for exercise 4, which is, honestly, the most radical, aggressive tactic in the entire text.
It really is.
It requires immense psychological fortitude. It is sourced from George Claeson's classic text, The Richest Man in Babylon, but applied here with a brutal twist. The rule is, pay yourself first.
Okay, everyone has heard pay yourself first. Financial advisors say it all the time, but they usually mean set up an automatic $50 transfer to your savings account when you get paid. The text takes this concept to a terrifying extreme.
It does. The conventional method is to pay all your external obligations first, the mortgage, the utilities, the credit cards, and then, if there is a scrap of capital left over, you allocate it to your savings or investments.
Which guarantees your asset column starves because there's rarely anything left over.
So the mandate here is that you must route your capital into your asset column first, before the mortgage, before the taxes, before the grocer.
Okay, let's run the real-world scenario.
Yeah.
Because this is where I would panic. You pay yourself first. You put the money into your investment account. But now, you don't have enough cash left to pay the electric bill, and the credit card minimum payment is due. The bills are piling up on the kitchen table. The late notices are arriving. What do? Do you dip into the asset column to pay the bills?
Absolutely not. The text is adamant. You defend your asset column like a fortress. You do not liquidate your investments to cover your liabilities.
So you just let the collectors call. You ruin your credit.
You use the pressure. This is the crux of the strategy. You let the pressure of those looming unpaid bills build up. You feel the anxiety. And you use that intense, terrifying financial pressure to force your brain to innovate.
It's a pressure cooker for financial genius.
Exactly. When the collection agency is calling, your brain can't be lazy. You are forced to hustle.
You figure it out.
You are forced to find a side venture, sell a service, negotiate a deal, or find an inefficiency you can exploit to generate the necessary cash to satisfy the creditors. You use the fear of the creditors to stimulate your financial intelligence, rather than using your labor to preemptively soothe them.
It forces you to expand your capacity to generate income, rather than just managing your scarcity.
It's terrifying, but undeniably effective. And that leads us to the final exercise, exercise 5. Choose your formula and learn fast.
The academic system teaches us one primary formula. Go to school, get a specialized degree, get a job in that field, save a percentage of your linear income, and put it in a diversified mutual fund.
That is a formula, and for decades it was relatively functional.
But in a hyper-accelerated, technologically disruptive economy, relying on a single, slow-moving formula is incredibly fragile.
So the exercise is to actively and aggressively seek out new formulas. Become a voracious student of unconventional mechanics.
Take a dedicated course on how to buy distressed debt.
Learn the intricacies of real estate syndication.
Study how to value small businesses for acquisition.
But the key is execution. You don't just passively consume the information and move on to the next book. You take one new formula, you master the mechanics, you apply it in the real world until it successfully generates cash flow, and then you go find the next formula.
Because the specific knowledge isn't the ultimate prize. Market conditions change. A strategy that works in 2026 might be obsolete by 2030.
The true asset you are building is the meta skill of rapid adaptation. It is not about what you know. It is entirely about how fast you can learn, implement, and extract value from new paradigms.
That adaptability is what makes you economically bulletproof. So let's pull all these threads together. We have navigated a massive paradigm shift today.
We really have.
We started by looking at the divergence of two father figures, illustrating that wealth is not a product of academic pedigree, but of a specific cognitive framing.
We examined the insidious nature of the rat race, driven by the twin engines of fear and greed, and how the middle class runs on a treadmill, chasing the illusion of the carrot.
We stripped away the accounting jargon to reveal the brutal truth of cash flow. Assets put money in your pocket, liabilities bleed you dry, and we confronted the uncomfortable reality that the American dream home is, mechanically, a liability that incurs massive opportunity costs.
We detailed how the wealthy use corporate entities as armor against taxation, and how they utilize financial intelligence to literally invent money through agreements and leverage, rather than extracting it through physical labor.
We learned that we must reframe failure, channeling the spirit of the Alamo, and ignore the cynical noise of the chicken littles who bury their capital in fallout shelters of fear.
And we laid out the exercises: finding your emotional why, testing conventional wisdom, using games to build mental plasticity, paying yourself first to force innovation, and rapidly mastering new formulas.
It is a comprehensive framework for escaping the gravitational pull of the middle-class struggle. But I want to leave you with one final, fundamental paradigm shift.
This is a great one to end on.
It is a concept drawn from the visionary thinker Buckminster Fuller, and it requires you to entirely abandon the way society tracks success.
The ultimate metric.
Society tells us to measure our success by our net worth. We add up the theoretical market value of our house, the blue book value of our cars, the balance of our retirement accounts, and we subtract our debt.
But net worth is a deeply flawed metric. It is an illusion of paper wealth. As we discussed, that house and those cars are often just expensive, depreciating liabilities sitting in a garage, generating zero cash flow while requiring constant maintenance.
They look good on a spreadsheet, but they don't provide actual freedom.
So Fuller proposes a radical redefinition. Do not measure your wealth in dollars. Measure your wealth in time.
Wealth in days.
He defines wealth as a person's ability to survive so many number of days forward. It is a measurement of absolute financial survivability.
The ultimate question you must ask yourself is this. If all of your active labor ceased today, if your employer went bankrupt, if you were physically unable to work, if your salary vanished into thin air instantly, how long could you survive and maintain your current standard of living, relying purely on the passive cash flow generated by your asset column?
If the answer is 2 weeks, you are not wealthy, regardless of the car you drive. You are simply highly paid and deeply vulnerable.
But if the answer is indefinitely, you have achieved true wealth.
That is the true metric. Wealth in days.
So my challenge to you, the listener, is to sit down this evening and calculate your actual number. Look ruthlessly at your balance sheet. Strip away the liabilities you've been pretending are assets. Calculate your monthly burn rate and divide it by the passive cash flow your true assets produce. Find your wealth in days.
It's an eye-opening exercise.
And whatever that number is, even if it's currently zero, take your first deliberate step toward building true, unshakable financial survivability. Because what if everything you were taught in school about money is exactly what keeps you from ever being wealthy? It's time to start writing your own curriculum.
Well